Hello and welcome to Unmodern Romance or Modern Romance depending on the channel. There's actually a lot of different channels and restrictions and things of that nature just because of the nature of what we talk about, which is relationships, which is kind of funny today because anytime that you give advice about relationships, you're typically talking about two things that supposedly in our modern political climate don't exist anymore. So you have to talk about things in a very generic sense about people and about how general people and psychology works. However, if you've taken any kind of a psychology course or come from any kind of a psychology background, you understand that psychology is directly related to physiology and how our bodies, us as the animal, deal with how we see reality, which is completely tied to our physical reality. And that doesn't exist anymore. So please check out our other channels where there's a lot of videos that I can't post to the larger social media platforms, which I'm sure most of you are watching me on. You can't post most of my videos there, so please like and subscribe and find me elsewhere. So today I'm going to be talking about ghosting, which I don't think really used to exist all that often. I'm 37 and I've pretty much been dating and active in that sense since I was a young teenager, and I feel like when you're younger, and I don't just mean like young, like high school, like teenage years, and like even in my 20s, yeah, the internet existed, kind of, sorta, but at the same time, dating was more transfixed to the physical knowledge. So you meet someone at church, and you're like, hey, you seem like an interesting person, let's grab dinner. Hey, you're my friend Johnny's sister or cousin or best friend or whatever. You aren't going to stand that person up because you now have to deal with Johnny. And you have social ties that you don't want to intrude upon or create problems with by being horrible to this person. So you're kind of at least trying to be on your best behavior because there is a social fabric at play that you're not trying to disrupt. The idea is that you are going to see that person again. So if you met them at a bar, it tended to be at the time in the 80s and 90s before the internet really took precedence that it has today, you were probably going to go to the same bar. It was probably the neighborhood bar that you frequented. And if the other person was also a regular, you didn't want to treat them too horribly because you were going to have to see them again. There was a real possibility that you were going to have to deal with the repercussions of your actions. So not only was ghosting less of an issue, but there was just a lot of other things that were less of an issue. So one of the best tips that I can give people in terms of they're having a lot of bad dating experiences, people are being awful, I feel like a lot of that really does stem from online dating. And I don't think that that is necessarily, because, I met them online or something like that. I think people can utilize those tools for good and to create a relationship and to expose themselves to a much larger dating pool. But I think you have to do it correctly. And I don't think very many channels or people who talk about this subject really are able to focus on ways and factors to actually mitigate those risks. But back to my original point, if you are dealing with someone in real life that you see regularly, who you're friends with or who is in your social circle, they are much less likely to harm you, they are much less likely to ghost on you, they are much less likely to do bad things to you. And getting back to online dating and dating sites, one of the biggest problems, psychologically speaking, with dating sites is the idea that there's always something better out there. So, typically when you sign up for these things and you get maybe 10 likes in the first couple of days, and then, because typically speaking, the algorithm is trying to make you stay on the site, so they're going to pair you up with the people most likely to accept you and want you so that you have a couple people to talk to. Because if it takes 2 weeks of work before you get a match and can talk to somebody, the chances of you staying on that site that they make money from you being on is minimal. So they want you to pair with someone. So you pair, and chances are, if you were going to find a match, it's in that first 5-10 people. It really is, like, because all of the algorithms, all of the work that they are doing is front-loaded trying to get you to stay. And typically speaking, what happens is you keep matching throughout the course of the week, because, like, let's say you get 10 matches, chances are that you're not going to be interacting with all 10 right away. Like, people have lives. Like, people typically are not tied to their phone, especially if they're good people, to where the moment you're like, hey, what's up, want to talk? That they're like, oh my God, yes, you are perfect. Let's make this a reality. That doesn't happen. So while you're waiting, you keep matching, and all of a sudden what you're doing is you see what you have, who you're matched with, and you're like, they're stable, they have a job, they have characteristics that I want in a partner, in my wife, but here's this person who is a 9 or a 10, they are out of my league, they would never talk to me in my real life, and they just matched with me, which means they're interested, obviously. So why would I talk to this stable person when I can compare them to what I could have? And it basically brings in a very, very strong psychological thing, which is the mystery box. And the mystery box is basically like the same thing as what's behind door number 3. Like, here's $1 million where you can have what's behind door number 3, and you pick door number 3, and it's like a box of junk. And that is proverbially how dating sites trick you, is that you are never looking is what I have worth my time. What you're looking at is what I have better than what I could have. And you don't know this person. And typically speaking, you see someone who you find attractive, and what our minds do is they fill that void, because typically speaking, you have a picture, so it's an attractive picture, and then you have a couple of lines of mostly bullshit. So, I like to have fun, I like to have someone who can make me laugh, and you're like, I'm funny, I'm a good person, I'm this, that, and the other. And then you're like, well, why can't I be good enough for this person? And almost never do you fill in your mind with the idea of, is this person good enough for me? And the notion that we have that there is the perfect person out there, the soulmate, doesn't exist. It is a complete fallacy. There is only one question that you should ever try to answer when trying to obtain a partner in the dating scene, which is this person good enough? Is this somebody I can grow with? Is this somebody who I can meet my life goals and life aspirations with? Is this someone who's going to be a good parent? Is this someone who's going to check all of the actual needed boxes? And if the answer is yes, and they are good enough, and you're both feeling it, and you're both willing to commit, sure, if you go out and you keep looking, maybe eventually you could find someone who's willing to settle down, who has all those boxes and is a little bit prettier in a couple of years. But the thing is in that couple of years, you will have wasted that time. Like, there is a lot of resources that are spent, financial time. Like, there's a lot of things in your life that you haven't done because you've spent that time dating and trying to find someone. So as you get older, there is more and more and more of an expectation of what you should be. So, if you're, say, 24, and you find someone who's good enough, and you're like, no, I can do better. So you date from 24 to 28. Now at 28, people kind of expect you to have your life way more together. So if you had settled down at 24, you and that other person are growing. So you don't have to, like, all that money and time that you would have spent buying drinks and going to bars and doing all this stupid stuff, you could have opened a savings account. You could have worked on getting more promotions and being better at jobs and things of that nature. Your kids, are going to kind of, exist already. And it gets harder as you get older. So, now you're 28. The reality is that you're not going to get someone better because you are less desirable. And the reality is that all of the good ones have been taken. All of the people that were available and interested at you at 24 have all settled down. So what you're left with is the people who are rejected. Like as you get older, things typically don't get better. And there's a slight distruth about that, because as you get past 30-ish, young 30s, there's a lot of people who are divorcing from really, really bad relationships. Like they got pregnant when they were 18 and they put everything into their partner, and he was an abusive, cheating asshole. So like you can get that good sweet girl, but the problem is now she has trust issues. She's a little broken. There's nothing wrong with broken. You can fix broken, you can work with broken, but you're probably a little broken too. But back to my point is that, excuse me, not social media, but these dating sites, they hyper accentuate that idea that something better exists and that what you have now isn't good enough. There have been so many studies about, like, the social dilemma is a really good thing on Netflix, but one of the things that they talk about is it directly compares you with a life that you don't have to make you jealous, when most people aren't posting things online that are awful, like when they get fired, when they get cheated on, when they have fights, when they drink too much, when they feel like crap and they stay in bed. They don't post that stuff. People who are professionals and who do this for a living, like, you create a lot of content up front so that when life kind of gets overwhelming, you have backup things to post on days when you are not presentable. And the audience doesn't always understand that, and they think, man, every day you post about how wonderful your life is. Why is my life not that wonderful? I'm stuck in, and there's nothing wrong with anywhere really, but like, you know, there's a lot of pressure that's put into, oh, middle of the country's awful, it's flyover country. There's a lot of great places in the middle of the country, but you know, you live in California, you live in Florida, you live in Texas, you live in New York, whatever, you know, the projection of the perfect places. I live in like I basically live in the Caribbean right now. There's a lot of poverty here, there's a lot of issues, and I'm not saying that I don't love where I live, it's an amazing place, but at the same time, like, there are problems everywhere and there are benefits everywhere, and if you can't be grateful for what you have, and you're always looking at what you don't have, you're never going to be happy. I don't care if you're a billionaire and you're looking at somebody who's richer than you, or has a prettier wife, or who, whatever the case is, if you're not grateful for what you have, because there's always going to be people who have it worse than you, right? Like, there's always somebody who's just has a horrible life, is in a horrible place in their relationship. So, you know, you're not them. And I think that trying to compete with other people who aren't you, who don't have everything that's connected to intrinsically who you are, and trying to compete with them is foolish, because you're not them. Like, you know, I'm a very intelligent person, but I also have Asperger's. So a lot of people are like, oh, I would love to be as intelligent and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, I also have a lot of issues socially, and there's a lot of things that I can't do. And there's, you know, or people are like, I wish I was as tall as you are, because I'm like 6'3". And, you know, do you know how hard it is to find a bed, or like you're on an airplane and you're like literally like there's no room for you, or just things aren't made for people my size. They're not. And if you have to specially make something for someone that's my size, you're going to pay for it. So everything's more expensive. And, you know, like, I'm not complaining. Like, that's been how my life has been my entire life. But, you know, it is what it is. But back to my point on ghosting is that this has become the culture. Like, this has become where we're at now. To people are used to the idea of that they're always being compared to somebody else, that nothing is real. So everyone has all these bad stories now. There's no one who when I was single, went on a date with, who was like, this is just so overwhelming. They're like, well, you know, I've been on this thing for 2 or 3 weeks and it's just been the worst. Or I had been on the site a year ago and I had such bad experiences, I had to take a year off, and it was just better to be single and completely let all of my sexuality and my needs and my relationship feelings for love die, rather than subject myself to social media, to dating online, because people are so horrible. And one of the things I found in younger people, and I feel like people are like, oh yeah, this is just how dating is done now, where let's say you want to go out on a Friday night, you'll accept dates from 2 or 3 people, assuming that probably if you accept 3 dates, 2 of them are going to ghost you, so you need backups. Like, ghosting has become so prevalent in culture that people just assume the other side is also doing it, and therefore it's okay if they do it back. So what ends up happening is if I accept 3 dates on a Monday, and come Tuesday, only one of those 3 is ghosted, so now I have 2 people. I'm going to pick the person who I would prefer going out with. It's not about, well, you know, we have more chemistry or whatever. It's like, well, this person presents themselves to have a better job, they're younger, they're prettier, they're more attractive. So the person who didn't get chosen, I'm just going to nothing. Like, I'm just going to stop talking to them. Like, I can't tell you in a year's time frame how many times I would talk to somebody, and typically this is from a little bit further away, like, you're about a 30-40 minute drive, and you know, some logistics, because like you can't just drop everything like and go, hey, yeah, you want to go grab lunch today, because you know, there's an hour there, there's an hour back, so like you got to figure everything out. But you wait a week for logistics to line up. You're going to go out on that Friday night, and then Friday, like, you talk to them Thursday night and everybody's excited, and then Friday, nothing. And you're like, hey, I'm really looking forward to tonight. Nothing. Hey, just wanted to make sure we're still going tonight. Nothing. Like, I can't tell you how many times that's happened, and I feel like, you know, I tell people this, especially people who are in relationships and haven't dated in the modern like era, and they're like, you must have done something to turn them off. And I'm like, no, like, it was pretty consistent, like the conversations that we were having to get them excited and to want to do stuff ended up being like, yeah, like things are going like normal, and then the day of, when it's actually time for them to follow through and do something and show up to the place and, you know, have dinner or whatever the plans are, they just get quiet. And to me, like, it's one thing to have like, well, I met somebody else and I would much rather do that. But there's something about just not talking to someone, being like, I am rejecting you from afar, and I don't even have the fortitude to look you in the face and be like, yeah, I'm just not interested. I think I would be better spent elsewhere. Or, you know, what I really don't understand is like, you know, if somebody is talking to 2 different people, and I feel like that's fine if you haven't even met either one of them yet, because you're single and available and mingling and doing all the stuff, and you're talking to person 1 and you agree to go out with them on Friday, and then person 2 comes along and they seem a little bit better, rather than being like, hey, person 2, why don't we go out on Saturday or next Friday, and kind of just see where it goes and give both of those people a chance. What ends up happening is you just don't talk to person 1 because you feel selfish and you know that you're in the wrong and you don't want to have a conversation with them. So what you end up doing is just nothing. You avoid conflict. And I feel like that notion is also something that didn't exist when I was younger. Like, if you made a decision that affected someone else, it was kind of understood that you would talk to that person and deal with the repercussions of how you were affecting them, and not just avoid conflict, which is exactly where people are at now. I literally can't tell you how many times this has happened. I would bet in a year 20 people, day of, stop talking. It wasn't like the day before we had a fight, or I said something and they were like, really, you're a flat earther? No, I'm not a flat earther, but like, you know, as an example, you're a flat earther, and they, the question mark, ... really? And then I didn't hear from them. It was nothing like that. It was just like, all right, looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And they're like, yeah, me too. And then the next morning you're like, hey, good morning. Deadline, you know. So I don't know, like, I feel like this is something that's been happening, and this is my best explanation to why it's happening. So my best advice to anyone who is looking at this, who's looking at trying to avoid these kind of situations, is to put themselves out there more. And I feel like where people have issues with putting themselves out there in the real world is they're busy. Like most people work more hours now than they ever have before, and you can passively be on your phone. Like that is another thing that totally bothers me, but like people can be at work and they've got 5 minutes of downtime so they can be on their phone and respond to a text message or respond to a message on the dating app or whatever the case may be. And people are just like, oh yeah, people are on their phone. Like, it's just an accepted part of life, and it makes everything in the everything in the real world take longer because we have to kind of wait on people to get off of their phones, which is infuriating in its own right, but it's still acceptable. So even if you don't have time to go to a bar and talk to random strangers, which is difficult, you can talk to people on your phone, and having people show interest in you builds self-confidence. It's nice to have people be like, oh, you're so pretty. And here's the other thing that I've noticed is just that guys tell girls that they're pretty because that's what girls want to hear. And then like I've seen it so many times where people be like, yeah, the moment then I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested, to be like, you're fat, you're all the bad words, like you're ugly, no man will want you. And it's like, well, wait a second, why did you want me?